Hi guys, this is Debbie with Debbie J's Crafting Corner. I've got another design team project for you for the Not2Shabby Shop. I'm using the box of the month, like the last two videos that I did for you guys a couple of weeks ago. And last time I checked the website, it looks like this may be out of stock, and because it's the box of the month, once it's gone, it's gone. But you should be able to recreate a lot of the things that I'm making with products that are already in your stash. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet, so let's go ahead and get started crafting. So I think that this stencil is just so darn cute, and I'm just going to do a little bit of playing. I did do a little sample piece over with some ink blending, like a little rainbow, and I thought it turned out so cute. But I'm going to go ahead and start at the top, and I think I'm going to start off with some blue, just using what's left over from other projects on my blending brush. So I'm going to line this up at the top, and then tack it down with the magnets that come with my Make Art Station, the Wendy Vecchi Make Art Station. Okay, so I'm removing this stencil, and then you can see that really nice light blue row of eggs. Now I'm lining up the stencil again and just a little bit further down so I can do a second layer but a different color. Again, I'm using the leftover ink that I've got on my blending brush, and I'm coming down in I'm going to do like a rainbow pattern. So this time I'm just using my purple brush. Now this is just a blending brush that I got off of Amazon. There's a lot of places that you can get one, and I'll make sure to leave a link down below for you guys in case you're interested in using this kind. I find that every brush size has got a purpose. This size helps me put a lot of ink down on my panel, which in this case was a good and a bad thing. I neglected to mask off the top of my stencil, so when I shifted it down, I got a little bit of that purple ink on the cardstock above it. I'm just going with it, guys. So I'm going to go ahead and add some more of the purple down and then shift everything down and see how that turned out. One thing that I didn't realize is that sometimes the tape that you use could be a little too sticky and could rip your paper. So it's probably a good idea before putting it down to try to remove some of that stick. In this case, I'm using some yellow tape from Spellbinders that is a bit stickier than I really remembered it being, and I love this stuff for doing my die cuts and everything. But in this case, it did rip my paper, so now I'm needing to try to go back and fix some of that blue because now it's got a piece of white torn out of one of the eggs. So for the rest of my stenciling, I'm actually going to be using a piece of washi tape that, although it isn't super sticky, I am getting some of the stick off before I put it onto this stencil because I don't want it to rip anything else off of this panel. So I'm just adding it to my stencil, and then I'm going to line it up below the purple so that it kind of just overlaps just a little bit so that they kind of look like, well, it's going to be a pattern of rows of eggs. It's going to be so cute when I get done. So this time I'm taking my red brush and bringing in, just like before, whatever is left over on my brush and moving those magnets around because because it's just that one row, it's kind of hard to line everything up and have it so that you're not accidentally covering up everything with the magnets. Anyway, I'm just putting down that one row, and it kind of turns into like this really pretty light pink. And then I'm going to go on to some orange. Now this looks pretty cute, but the first thing that I see is that there is that overlap of color between the eggs that I don't particularly like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some more color. So I'm starting off again up at the top with the blue, and now thinking back on it, it might have been easier to do the whole thing if I started at the bottom, but that's neither here nor there. That's fine. I'm going to add in some blue suede from Catherine Pooler onto my blue brush and actually I'm going to use a small blending brush and add some ink on there because it's a lot easier to control than the big one, and let me put some color just in those basically in the peaks of all of those little eggs. Okay, let's see how it looks. Oh my goodness, I love that deep dark blue at the top and then it fading out to the bottom. That just looks lovely. So I'm going to do the same thing with each of the rows of eggs, and let's see how that one turns out. First, I've only got this one brush, so I'm going to have to clean it on a baby wipe before moving down to the next color. So like I said, I am going to do the same kind of technique with this next one. The next color I'm using is Sweet 16, again from Catherine Pooler, and I'm adding that color right up at the top, including the part where it's going to be overlapping the blue eggs above them, because these purple need to be a little bit in front of. So it's kind of the way I have it envision it anyway is that the ones in the back are a little bit further away and the ones in the front are going to be a little bit closer, so it's kind of a cascading look there. So on each of these rows I'm going to focus the additional color at the top and let it kind of blend out to the lighter color that we started off with, like in this case the lighter purple, and just see how that one goes. I think this is going to turn out pretty good. Next, I'm moving on down to the red, and this time I'm going to use some cranberry fizz from Catherine Pooler. Again, I'm cleaning that brush to try to get most of the purple off, and I'm just doing this on a baby wipe, and then I'll wipe it down with a paper towel to get some of the moisture out so that doesn't transfer to my paper. For the last row of eggs, I'm going to use some orange Bellini ink, again from Catherine Pooler. I love Catherine Pooler inks, in case you didn't tell. Anyway, I'm just going to be adding them on using the same technique. Now, one thing I have kind of fast forwarded through a bunch of this, so one thing you're not seeing is that it is taking a bit of time to get all of that ink in. You're going to want to put down multiple layers until it looks the way you want it to look. And I just say, play and just feel your zen, I guess. While I was doing this, I was also watching some videos. There was the Card Maker Success Summit that was this weekend, so I've been watching a bunch of those. And I believe that during a lot of the recording of this video, I was actually watching, finally got away from the summit because the last session had already happened, but I was at that point watching Ryan with Glitter Grunge Greetings and my friend Elizabeth over at Elizabeth Costa Rogers' YouTube channel. So I was watching some videos just like you do while I was doing some crafting, and it's just like with coloring. It is kind of soothing, and I don't know, it is de-stressing, so it works out really, really well. So even though it does take a little time to get all of those colors down just the way you want it, it's a therapeutic feeling as you go. Here's one more tip though. It does help if your ink pads are actually juicy. Some of mine are, some of mine aren't, and I just kind of kept going. And it's like even if it wasn't quite as inky as I'd like and took a little bit longer, again, it just turns out so pretty, even if it takes a little bit of time. But it did tell me I kind of need to re-ink my ink pads. Okay, so I wasn't as careful as I should have been removing the stencil this time, so I, again, ripped a little bit of my inked background. I ripped off a little bit of the purple, but I am going to pretty much fix that before I go on to the next step. So all of that ink blending is done, and I am so impressed with the result. Well, I'm so impressed with the results. I absolutely love this. But I guess you guys know me. I kind of can't leave well enough alone, so we're going to go on and do another technique on top of it. This stencil comes with some detail stenciling to go over the eggs, so we're going to use that and some lunar paste. So I'm starting off with this gold color. This is Slippery When Wet. That is one of the Simon Hurley lunar paste colors, and I think it is at my absolute favorite just because I absolutely love that gold. I mean, come on. So I am basically just scraping that over with a palette knife. I do have to use one with it kind of a thin end so it doesn't go all over the place, and I'm just scraping that across the top of my stencil and going into each of those little grooves that have been cut out of the stencil. This is going to add all the decorative lines and dots and such to decorate my eggs. One thing when you're using a paste like this, you do have to wait, and a stencil like this one is a border stencil, so if you're doing layers like this, you're going to have to wait in between each color for it to dry. I'm not that patient, so I mostly waited for it to dry and just watched some more videos and such while I was doing that. So let's take that off with the gold and see what it looks like. You guys are gonna love this. Oh my god, it is just too pretty. So I'm going to set that one aside to dry, and when it's done I can start on the next layer. So I really don't know if there is a right or wrong order to do these, but I decided to, instead of going on with the gold, because I was afraid there was going to be too much pressure and not quite enough dry time for the gold, I decided to go on back to the top, and I'm using Clear Skies for that one. I'm going to do the same technique. I've cleaned everything off, my stencil, my palette knife, and I'm going to add some of that blue skies through through the stencil again, through those lines to add the decor piece to those blue eggs. So after the blue is done, I'm going on to the purple eggs. Now I had initially intended to do some, believe I was going to use, trying to decide between this pink and this red. The red is Bee Sting and the pink is the new Prom Queen, and I just thought that that would give some pretty good contrast. So I had decided I was going to use Bee Sting and then use the Prom Queen on the red, and then I forgot and put Prom Queen over the purple. Now when I removed that stencil, I did shift it a little bit and messed up the purple just a little bit, the pink on the purple, but nobody else is going to notice except for me. I think this still turns out gorgeous, and you can see a lot of that detail on those eggs and even on the gold where I had done that first one. It looks like at some point I scuffed that a little bit, so it's a little bit messed up in one area, but overall it looks great. Now I have to wait for everything to dry and then I can go on to the red. I'm sorry about the lighting, guys. Looks like overnight something changed with my settings on my computer. I let all of this dry overnight, and then this morning I came in and added some of that red bee sting, which is why now you can see my fluffy bathrobe because it's a little bit chilly in the house this morning. Anyway, I'm going in and doing the exact same thing that I did before with the bee sting over the red eggs, and going to add that nice shiny detail to those. Okay, here comes another oops. I must not have been completely awake because I really, I really slid that across all that wet lunar paste. It's gonna be okay though. I'm gonna make the card work. I just have to clean up the mess that I just made all over me and all over the stencil and all the things. Anyway, take a look at this. I think all of the shine is pretty. I'm not too happy with the red because everything's kind of smushed together, but luckily it didn't really go over the other colors. Now that that panel is all dry, I am so loving all of those eggs. I'm picking out a stamp from one of the stamp sets that are in the kit. This one was Poppy Spring, I think. I'll leave the titles down below. Hopefully they will be re-released at some point and you'll be able to get these because they are just adorable. And I'm also using one of the gnomes that I had colored up in a previous project, and I'll link to that video here too so you can see the coloring. So what I'm going to do, because I don't want to cover up all of that gorgeous lunar paste egg goodness, I don't want to cover up all of that. I'm going to use a strip of vellum to act as my sentiment banner across the card, and it's going to cover up some of it but not everything, and it'll be just enough, it'll mute it just enough that the sentiment and the little gnome will pop. So I'm lining this up in my Misty so that I can stamp it down in some VersaFine Clear ink. My thought is I need it to be a bold color on there. I don't want to have to multiple stamp and have it messed up, so that's why I'm going to use the VersaFine Clear. The stamping looks good, so I'm going to set that aside and let it dry. Okay, if you have used Vellum and stamped on it with VersaFine, you already know it doesn't really want to dry. So I decided to do something I rarely do, and that is emboss on Vellum. Now the VersaFine Claire does stay wet longer, so the embossing powder is able to stick to it, and here's a great test. I had let it sit for a couple of minutes and it hadn't even started to dry yet, so I just put some of my Wow Clear embossing over the top and it looks fine. Now I'm going to gingerly hit that with my heat tool so I can get that embossing complete on that vellum. Vellum is plastic, so if you let your heat gun focus on a space for too long, it can melt the vellum. So I had to shift it around. Even though this is a small sentiment, I did kind of go back and forth and make sure that nothing melted, that the vellum paper didn't melt. I'm using some double-sided adhesive tape to adhere my little vellum strip down. So I had already trimmed down my panel a little bit so that this strip of vellum would fit across the front and be able to wrap around the edges of my card. And right now I'm just going to add a little bit of that tape to each of the two ends so that I can get it all lined up and adhered down. For the rest of the card, I don't really have a whole lot of artsy stuff to do. I'm pulling pieces that I've got from that card kit and from all of those little extra embellishments that I created back on those other cards. So I'm starting off with some patterned paper, and then I'm layering up my panel, and then I'm adding one of the little gnomes that I had colored in that previous video. Next, I'm going to add on the last extra bits that I also have left over from all of my coloring from that other video, other card, that I didn't get around to using until now, and it's the perfect finishing touch. I think this card turns out super cute, and if you'd like to see some more super cute cards that I've made using some super cute products from Not Too Shabby, be sure to check out this playlist here. You guys have a wonderful day, and remember, if I can make it, you can too. See you next time.